Forty20 Newscast.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 4020 Newscast. It's Friday the 10th of July. I'm Tom Coates. I'm joined by Tom Alderson. We are the co-founders of 4020 News. We'll get straight into it with this week's biggest stories, starting with a developing story earlier today over lunchtime. We received a media advisory from Super League's head of media, James Peacock, advising of a fixture reveal next week. This has been delayed in the past, so I'm sure there'll be coaching staff and playing personnel eagerly looking on. Tom, what do you think we can expect to see?
I certainly think that the initial things will obviously be behind closed doors as the Super League competition's already announced. I don't think that that's likely to change anytime soon, although they have mentioned trying to get crowds back in small numbers by October. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. In terms of the logistics, I think it'll very much take a similar route to the NRL when it initially started, in playing games in a small number or reduced number of venues. We've already had announced the first return games will be a triple header at Headingley. I don't think that will be a standalone event. I think that Headingley is obviously being highlighted as one of the grounds that a number of clubs can utilise, and I certainly think that we'll probably see. I'm not speculating a number, but we'll see the 12 teams play across a small handful of grounds. I think where they're comfortable that the biosecurity measures and all of the different things to keep the players and the teams safe can be adhered to. We'll have to wait and see what those are. But in terms of the fixtures themselves, a shortened season. We're obviously not going to see any of the loop fixtures, which personally for me is a little bit of a relief. I don't necessarily think playing less games is a bad thing for the players. Teams will play each other home and away. Just the once home and away in quotation marks, because for a certain period of time, certain numbers of clubs will lose their home advantage. But it will be interesting to see how that develops and see whether that affects teams. I know that certain people, such as Richard Agar and various players, have said that because you're playing behind closed doors, the home ground advantage won't make much of a difference, which I can see the argument in that. So, we'll have to see what happens. But I certainly think that Super League will return playing on a limited number of venues. Initially for the short term, but we'll see how it develops as it moves forward.
Yeah, you get the impression that the loss of the loop fixtures is perhaps the only aspect that will be positively received. It's going to be one of those announcements, I fear, that is going to cause a lot of controversy, and it's one of those situations that the RFL finds itself in where there aren't going to be very many happy people when the fixtures are revealed, but we'll have to see what happens. Rewinding to Monday, a very busy day in terms of news. We had quite a lengthy press release issued from the RFL following their latest board meeting. Amongst the news was the acceptance, the ratification rather, of the rule change recommendations, which will see six to go introduced, I should say, and scrums scrapped temporarily, that is. But also, perhaps the biggest headline was the lack of progress on promotion and relegation. So still no decision on whether or not there will be movement between Super League and Championship, and indeed Championship and League One. The RFL's copped a lot of stick for not making a decision yet. Is this criticism fair, Tom? And do you think promotion and relegation should be scrapped for this season?
I think it's starting to get to the point where it's hard to ignore the criticism. This has gone on for a long period of time. This is something that's been debated for a number of months now, and I think that Championship and League One clubs especially are getting a little bit frustrated, or especially Championship clubs are getting frustrated with not knowing where they stand. There is obviously the bigger issue with the Championship and League One as to whether the seasons will return at all. At this stage, we don't know, but I certainly think there's been a lot of noise made from certain clubs in the Championship, the likes of Leigh and Featherstone, who've obviously got vested interests financially and, on the field in terms of making a real push for promotion this year. And I think that, without knowing too much about the internal finances of these clubs, a lot of their financial success in the short term hinges on whether they get promoted or not. And I think that one way or another, the RFL and Super League need to make a decision on it. It's obviously going to impact clubs in Super League as well, teams down at the bottom. There's no doubt that these clubs take huge financial hits from getting relegated. My personal opinion on what we should do, I I do agree with the thought process that it's perhaps a little bit unfair to see a team relegated from Super League with this shortened season. It gives teams far less games than in previous seasons to ensure their safety. I would personally be a fan, although this may not be popular with a lot of people, of seeing promotion remain from the Championship but defer relegation for a year and include a 13-team competition in Super League next year. That may not be popular due to the fact that, the Sky money would have one more club to be split between. There'd certainly be some clubs that aren't a fan of that. But in terms of fairness and giving, the Championship clubs something to strive for that they would have originally planned and trying to keep it as normal as possible, I think that might be the best balance. How you manage that in the long term would remain to be seen. I personally think in the long term, Super League should be striving to be a 14-team competition anyway. So I think that could be a logical step. But I can understand the frustrations of why there's no decision. It's something that I think it's a box they need to tick now, so that clubs certainly know where they stand one way or another.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of looking for a solution for your Derek Beaumonts and your Mark Campbells, who are eager to see their investment given an objective, namely promotion. I just can't see promotion relegation being sustained this season. I really can't. I think the only option. I think I understand what you're saying in terms of adding extra clubs to the Super League, but I think then you create the issue with, as you've already alluded to, spreading the already quite thin central distribution from the TV money even more thinly. So I'm not sure that's a starter, but we'll see what happens. There's certainly a lot of agendas to placate and a lot of people to keep happy. The following day, we ran a story from our reporter, John Davidson. This is relating to the resumption of Super League fixtures and an email that John obtained sent to Super League clubs warning of the importance of adhering to social distancing guidelines, and perhaps more concerning, noting examples of the guidelines already being breached. Now, over the last few months prior to the NRL restarting, we saw some quite negative headlines in the Aussie media about similar breaches, about players not following the rules and being brazen enough to add stuff to Instagram and Facebook. Obviously, the guys at the RFL and at Super League are keen to avoid similar headlines, and the sport in the UK just can't afford that negative publicity.
No, you're 100% right. Rugby league has the issue of not being a predominant sport, dominant sport rather in the UK. It doesn't have the same foothold in sporting society as it does in Australia. So negative press and negative PR obviously impacts the sport far greater over here, which really increases the importance of players, staying in the sort of good books and keeping their behaviour to how it should be. And not only that, setting an example for other people. There's a lot of, these players, whether they like it or not, are role models for younger people in society. And in times like these, where especially when there hasn't been a lot of sport on, a lot of society will be looking to their sporting figures. People will be excited for these players to come back. They'll be really itching to get some live Super League on the TV. So it really is a non-negotiable that the players have to adhere to whatever rules they're put under. You're absolutely right about the media storm that it caused in the NRL with the likes of Josh Addo-Carr, Latrell Mitchell, Nathan Cleary, all being publicly hung, drawn and quartered basically in the media for blatant breaches of the social media ruling. And even at times they were talking about it could jeopardise the restart of the competition, which is certainly not something we want to see in Super League. So, and on top of all of that, regardless of what it may look like and what image it may portray in society, it's the safety of everybody that is paramount in this situation. The players are not being, told to social distance and restrict where they go and what they do, for any other reason other than to maintain the safety during this pandemic. So, whatever your ruling is on what the players have to do in their day-to-day lives in terms of the testing, the limitations to where they can travel. I know that in the NRL, when the competition came back, players weren't allowed to leave their bubbles. They had to go from training to home and back again and to games, and weren't able to do very much. I think that's been relaxed a little bit more now, but certainly in the short term, I'd expect something similar in Super League, and I would expect all of the Super League players and any of the players in the UK to adhere to those without question.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you? You look at the situation, the fixtures that we've already discussed, and the mess, and that's not a criticism. It will be a very convoluted and complex system of fixtures. And then you look at the pay cut narrative that's continued this week with a lot of speculation and a lot of players quoted as being less than happy, shall we say, about the pay cuts put to them and fears that it could jeopardise the start of Super League if clubs can't reach agreements with their players. So the last thing they need, you'd say, is further turmoil in terms of players not being able to follow the rules. So let's hope that doesn't become an issue. On the field, it's always nice to get some player news. It gives you a feeling of normality. And we had a couple of stories this week. Danny Brough to Bradford, confirmed by the Bulls following weeks of heavy speculation. I think the Bulls' majority shareholder, Mark Sawyer, said as much a couple of weeks ago. But it's now confirmed. It's all over the line. He joins them from the start of next season. From your point of view, Tom, is it a good move for the player and is it a good capture for the Bulls?
Yeah, I think you just need to look at the calibre of player that Danny Brough is. You know, he may be, there's no doubt that he is towards the back end of his career now, 37. He's been in the game a long time. There's fewer players in the game with more experience than he has. And what he's achieved at the game, Man of Steel, Challenge Cups, he's achieved a lot. He's played internationally with Scotland and he's played a lot of Super League. So I certainly think that for the club, this is a really significant capture. I think, Mark Sawyer came out and said, John Keir rather came out and said it was a sign of the club's ambitions of trying to get back to where they believe they should be. And I think that somebody, like Danny Brough, who's been there and done it at the highest level, especially in that position, could add some real sort of experience and direction to the Bradford side. The Bradford side of recent years has been quite young. They've brought through a lot of their own youngsters, and I think that he could have a really sort of calming influence and dictate, how the team runs and really sort of, he's got a very, very good kicking game as well. And that'll be, a crucial aspect if Bradford are wanting to get themselves promoted from the Championship. Having said that, it's not by all means the finished puzzle there for Bradford. One player doesn't make a team. That they do have, like I said, a young side. My opinion, they could probably do to add a couple more experienced heads in there, but it's certainly a good signing for Bradford. And for Brough, personally, like you said, the writing seems to have been on the wall that he would have been on his way out at Wakefield, which will sadly for him see the end of his Super League career. But we've seen a number of players that are continuing to play on in the lower divisions. Like your likes of your Sean Penkoviches, your Jamie Thackeray's, who are even possibly a little bit older than Danny Brough. It's certainly not it's not in any way a bad level or bad standard competition to play in, and he could see his career prolonged as a result of it. He signed a 2-year deal, which means it's not there for a 12-month swan song. He's going there to make a difference, and he'll be linking up with John Keir, where he had success at Hull FC. So I think it's a good move all around for both parties.
Yeah, I'm always glad to see players drop down to the so-called lower leagues before retiring. You get a lot of Super League players that hang up the boots, and that's they're very well entitled to do that after sacrificing the body for as many years as they have. But you've mentioned there some of the older heads in the Championship, and I'd add to that Paul Sykes at Dewsbury, a player that's spent his entire career almost in Super League now, plying his trade in the second tier, and Scott Morell at Halifax, another veteran halfback, and still a really good playmaker, still a central cog for Halifax. So it'd be great to see another big name, another former international, if not a current Scotland international, running around in the Championship. Another halfback in the news this week who isn't going anywhere is Lee Gaskell. He's signed a new deal at Huddersfield. In a past life, I worked at an agency that worked with Bradford Bulls, and I remember seeing Lee Gaskell and working with him. And I was always puzzled by the fact he was in the Championship. I remember watching him come through at St Helens and him being groomed and coming through that fantastic environment. And it always puzzled me why he wasn't still playing in Super League. He's obviously returned there with Huddersfield. He's shown good form. He's got the new partnership this year with Aidan Caesar that Simon Wolford's very excited about, and I think Huddersfield Giants fans are excited about. In the press release announcing Gaskell staying on, it was interesting to note that target of a top 4 place. We've seen Huddersfield lift the League Leaders Shield in the past. That's now 7 years ago. Can they challenge again?
In the immediate term, if you're asking me in sort of 2020, I'm not sure that that is something that they can achieve. I might be completely wrong. We saw Salford, come out of nowhere last year from battling relegation to making the grand final. So by no means is it impossible. Gaskell obviously signing a 4-year deal is wanting that as a possibly a mid to long term goal or something he certainly wants to achieve his time in the club. And with them bringing in somebody like Aidan Caesar, who's made a huge difference to them this year already, you can see. And they're another club that quietly achieve a lot in terms of their lower grades. They've got a lot of players in their starting 17 now, week in, week out, that have come through their academy system and are all a year older for the experience. And we see that players benefit as a result of that. And in the next few years, this may be the time that Huddersfield step up, from being a club that have had their struggles in recent seasons to being, contenders and pushing at the right end of the table. And I certainly think that Lee Gaskell's a vital part of that. I agree with you completely in that it was a little bit puzzling to see him spend quite a few seasons in the Championship. I certainly think that he's a quality Super League halfback. Perhaps injury has let him down at times. There's been a lot of cases where he's missed the odd game and really disrupted the fluency of his seasons, especially at Huddersfield. But he seems to have strung a few games together, and he's forming a really good partnership with Aidan Caesar. He's a good contrast to Caesar. Caesar is a good game manager, great kicking game, great skill set, and Gaskell's a very elusive runner of the ball. He's deceptively big for a 6 as well. So yeah, I think that that's a great signing for Huddersfield. And can they challenge for the top 4 immediately? My gut instinct would be no, but I certainly see no reason why they couldn't push on for that in the coming 2 or 3 seasons if they could progress or keep progressing like they have from 2019 into 2020.
Yeah, shout out to Andy Kelly there, the head of youth at Huddersfield. You mentioned the young players coming through, and that is often missed. But there's the senior brothers. There's Jake Wardle, who's very, very highly rated now. Fantastic to see the old cliche of players coming through the ranks to represent the team at Super League level. And Wigan have told that story themselves in recent years and led that narrative, if you like. But it's good to see other clubs stepping up. And to be fair, Huddersfield, it's probably unfair to say that it's a recent thing for Huddersfield. Look at the Jermaine McGilvrays and Michael Lawrences of this world who've come through the youth ranks and become fine Super League players over a number of years. So long may that continue. We mentioned Wigan there. They were also in the news this week. Another off-the-field story and another off-the-sport story, if you like, with Wigan Athletic. The Warriors co-tenants at the DW Stadium placed into administration. The Warriors, under Ian Lenigan, releasing a press announcement stating their aims to buy Wigan Athletic and to bring the two clubs under one sporting banner. Now, Tom, I know by no stretch can we describe you as a football fan, but from a rugby league perspective, given the fact that the Warriors and the Latics share the DW Stadium, and given the fact that we've seen Wigan, not in the immediate past, but in the not too distant past, forced to move games away from the stadium, it's a positive thing for the sport if Lenigan and the Warriors can get control of the football club.
Yeah, I think it certainly has potential to do so, doesn't it? Obviously it's not great for Wigan Athletic that they've, from a business point of view, that they've gone into administration. It'll be concerning times for their fans. I think it is a good show of strength and a good show of unity from Wigan Warriors and Ian Lenigan. Getting behind fellow club in their community. The Wigan community is a big sporting community of rugby league and football. And like you say, if a potential deal can be done where Wigan Warriors can end up taking over or having a significant impact in helping Wigan Athletic financially, there is scope for them to have a stronger position in the sharing of the stadium. I certainly think that, without knowing the ins and outs of how the agreement shared with the council between the two clubs, I certainly think that it would impact Wigan Warriors negatively if Athletic were to, if the financial situation was to worsen and they had to drop out of playing games there in a hypothetical sense. I think that would make life a lot harder for the Cherry and Whites. But you're right that if they are able to do a deal where they become part owners or some form of ownership of the Wigan Athletic Club, that would put Wigan Warriors in a much stronger position in terms of potentially dictating is the wrong word, but controlling fixtures where on when the games are played there, and might have scenarios where the Warriors and not having to move games around at the last minute or at short notice. I know that Hull FC have a similar thing with Hull City, where they've had to change league games due to the commitments of the football team, which will be frustrating for fans. And if that's something that can come out of this, as well as showing a good sign of unity and support for the two clubs in Wigan, then that can only be a good thing for the Warriors.
Let's hope so. Let's hope by whichever means the football club is saved. As a rugby league fan, we don't want to see any sports clubs going under. We'll close with a name very familiar to Super League fans, Ryan Hall, who now plies his trade in the NRL with the Sydney Roosters, who was scoring tries for fun in the second half against the North Queensland Cowboys. His opposite man, an 18th man and a last-minute replacement for Brett Morris, coasted over for 5 tries. Ryan Hall didn't get a try. He crossed in the last minute but was pulled back for a forward pass, and he's still yet to score a try in NRL. What does this man have to do to get over the line, Tom?
Oh, it's rapidly becoming one of the most frustrating things for me to watch as an English rugby league fan, trying to watch an English player make his name in the NRL. I've had a few jokes with some friends watching these games. I have my own conspiracy theories that whichever wing Ryan Hall is on, the Roosters develop a game plan deliberately to go to the other side. You couldn't make it up. Like, he played on the right wing the week before, and all of the attack went down. The majority of the attack went down the left. Or the week before that, sorry. And then, like you say, he comes onto the left wing, which is his preferred wing, where he scored countless tries for Leeds and for England. And Matty Cavallo comes in as a last-minute replacement, as you say, as 18th man onto the right wing, and sure enough, scores 5 tries. The first Rooster to do so since 1955. You could not make it up. Very, very, joking aside, that's obviously not what the Roosters are doing. That they're a very good side. They've got plenty of points of attack. They can score from anywhere on the field. That's just the way that the ball's bounced for Hall at this point in time. But it is developing into quite a funny narrative that he can't seem to get over the try line. I mean, in fairness, he has only played perhaps a dozen NRL games for the Roosters. He missed a lot of rugby. He joined the Roosters, of course, after tearing his ACL for Leeds. So he missed a lot of games. And he dislocated his knee a couple of times last year as well. I think he had to have further surgery. So he was limited to limited game time last year, and he might have an extended run in the side at the moment with Daniel Tupou being out with an ankle injury for a longer period. So let's hope that in the coming weeks they can deliver some good ball to the left edge, and we might see Ryan Hall going in for a try for the Roosters, and that familiar sight that Super League fans and England fans alike will be used to seeing.
Definitely, and you look at that recent history of NRL imports from Super League, and there is it's something that's impossible to ignore, that it does tend to be the forwards that make a success of the move over there, whereas the backs seem to struggle. So let's hope that, Ryan can get over the line and prove some doubters wrong. So that'll do it for another 4020 Newscast. We'd like to thank you for listening. And as always, for the latest news and magazine content added every day, stick to 4020.news.
4020 Newscast.